welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. We got the whole crew with us on this episode, Rusty Mansell and Kip Adams. Guys, don't look now, but it's almost April. We are closing in on the midpoint of spring practice, and before we know it, we'll be getting ready for G-Day on April 15th. Guys, you can already tell that spring season's getting here. We had to have the AC guy out working on our place yesterday, so fun times. But hey, we got that early in the week, so the rest of the week's looking up. Rusty, how is this week treating you?
Well, I'm sure he cut you a discount by the hour as well for driving out there.
Yes.
Good. Kind of the news that we had yesterday with Kendall Milton, but you start talking about spring and basically halfway over, spring practice halfway over. This is a big scrimmage coming up this weekend. We'll have a lot more coming up, next week on it. But I'm interested in this spring scrimmage and this first spring scrimmage and see how things shake out. Wide receivers versus DBs and obviously quarterback reps.
Kip, how is the week treating you as we get ready for another week of spring ball?
Man, I think it's treating me pretty well. I'm starting to get kind of scared after I just told you guys that I'm going to attempt to run my first ever 5K this weekend. I'm already regretting my awful decision making. I don't know what led me to sign up for this, thinking I was going to be ready for this. But you know what? Let's see what happens. If you guys read about me being on the injury report next week, you know what happened. But I thought I'd go ahead and whatever I'm going to do this year, let's get it done before it gets over 80 degrees. And I think, that's kind of a good plan for all of us and a good plan for Georgia. Let's get all of this done before we get into the, that summer heat, which is that's the time when the team gets out there and then Jordan and everyone else is the beat is actually happy. They only get to see stretching. Because we don't want to be out there whenever teams are trying to actually get better and get prepared for the season. That's when we make sure we have working AC. Which right now, guys, if that now is the time to go ahead and get that done before it's too late. And let's enjoy these last couple of days and weeks in the 70s while we can.
Right. Have all those air filters changed, be ready to go. And Kip, we'll have you an ice bath ready at the finish line because I feel like that's going to come in handy. Let's jump right into what Rusty had mentioned a second ago. Big news on Monday with Kendall Milton. Dealing with a hamstring injury. He's going to miss the rest of spring. Obviously a significant situation given Kendall. Looks like he will be the number one running back, came into the spring with that being the expectation. Rusty, what kind of situation does this leave Georgia's running back with, at least for the spring? The fact that Kendall will not be available and what some of those other guys are going to have to do in the meantime.
First of all, you got to kind of feel for Kendall Milton, man. I mean, this guy's been banged up. Seems like every time he gets right there on the edge to be that guy, something like this happens. And, this right here, a little more. I don't know that it's torn, but I do know this is a pretty significant injury here. He's going to be out for a while. Everything I heard yesterday, he'll be back this season as long as nothing's crazy, and should be able to get back into the summertime workouts. But you start dealing with hamstrings and stuff like that. There's nothing to do. You can do all the rehab and everything you want, but that takes time. So, this is an important year for him. The good news is it happened, here at the end of March and not September. Because really, if you go through a season, that never really heals. You never can really get back. Now he's got a couple of months. Now he can really rehab as much as possible and just let that thing rest. So, you hate it for him, but, as I wrote yesterday on Dogs 247, sounds like Roderick Robinson, the true freshman from San Diego, California, all 235 pounds of him is kind of announcing his presence when they have physical reps. It sounds like Roderick Robinson is not shying away from contact, and he's making an early name for himself. So that could be good news. You got Dejon Edwards, Branson Robinson are proven guys as well. So, Georgia's got some depth there, but Kendall Milton, you look at him as his experience and, some of the late season stuff where he flashed and you're like, this is the guy, he's healthy, and you just kind of want him to be there this summer so we can see 100% full-blown grown man Kendall Milton and see what he can do for the Georgia throughout a whole season.
Yeah, you have to feel for Kendall. I'm thinking about a couple weeks ago when we talked to him. You could tell he's super excited to play in Mike Bobo's offense. And I had a few people message me, and I think there was a little bit of talk of this on the board. Being like, "Well, he's got to take stretching a lot more seriously. He's got to do this and that." He made it a point, and I don't think he was even asked about it, talking about that. The efforts he's made to try to prevent some of these injuries. He dealt with a hamstring in fall camp last year. He had a groin injury. It's just a tough blow, and you hope a kid like Kendall, as hard as he works, gets that opportunity, and hopefully he'll be able to go once we get back in summer, and we'll be set to go by the time we get to fall camp.
I'll touch on that. He can be injury prone, but someone to say he's not taking stretching serious, there's too many eyes on you, too many people. You look at Ron Corson, who's one of the best in the country. You look at Scott Sinclair. If you ever get a chance to watch Georgia in warm-ups, watch how many people are standing there when they're doing stretching. Even in pregame, there's 50 freaking staff members there, and they're walking through every lane. So I don't blame Kendall Milton for this. I think, he can be injury prone, but as far as someone saying he's not taking stretching serious enough, and those types of things, look, this young man knows how important this year is. I guarantee you he's attacking every single day with serious stuff. You look at him, he's put together and those types of things. So just really, really string of bad luck. You hope he's done with it. But someone to say he's not taking that serious, that's just not the case, because at Georgia and these big-time programs, they have so many people on you and get you loose and those types of things. And particularly with someone like him, they probably give him extra. They probably look at him extra treatment, those types of things. So you hate it for him. You just hope he's back for this season.
No doubt about it. And, he talked about, there were questions about maybe he looked to go elsewhere this offseason. He talked about that a couple weeks ago and said, look, I'm at Georgia. I want to graduate. I want to finish with my guys. So to Rusty's point, you hope that he comes back strong and is able to do and accomplish what he wants to accomplish. Kip, when it comes to the spring, what do you think about the opportunity that this now presents to some of those guys Rusty talked about? Roderick Robinson, Branson Robinson, Dejon Edwards, those guys that have a chance to get maybe a little bit more work because Kendall is on ice.
Yeah, I mean, for Georgia, they need Del McGee will tell you he needs 4 healthy running backs to get through a season. Georgia plans on playing in December, late in December, and in January. That's the expectation for this team. So you look at this group, they got to go out there and show that they can not just run between the tackles. I mean, with Edwards and Robinson, they have to expand their skill set. One thing with Kendall Milton, everyone talks about who's going to replace Kenny McIntosh in the passing game. That aspect of Georgia's offense, is it going to go away? And that is one area where Kendall Milton's athleticism, that kind of made me think, he might be that guy that's best suited to be on the field in those situations, to be more involved in the passing game. But you got to stay on the field. So this spring, you got to look and see, can Edwards, can Branson or Roderick, how well can they catch the ball out of the backfield? Are they able to pick up pass pro? Those are big aspects of their game that they have to showcase this spring so that they can, earn the trust of Mike Bobo and this coaching staff. So I think as far as the ground game is concerned, sure, they got guys. I don't think that was a worry to begin with, even though Kendall Milton was, he got, I think it was right under 7 yards per rush. It was the highest on the team last year, and got in the end zone 8 times. There's production there as well. But these other guys are really talented, and they're going to have a chance to kind of showcase and earned another chunk of playing time, at least in the spring, but also audition just in case Kendall Milton's not ready to go, just in case, Andrew Paul is not ready, not completely back from his injury last season as well. Another guy that's really talented and has a chance to, if he can get, back on the field, really be productive for Georgia. But I think right now it's an audition. And Georgia's going to need Kendall Milton late in the season, as Rusty said, but definitely, with the grind of playing what Georgia hopes is 15 games for the, 3rd year in a row, they want to make sure they have all hands on deck. So it's going to be a big summer for Kendall Milton, a big spring for these other running backs, and a chance to see some different looks, see if these guys can kind of not replicate what Kenny McIntosh does, but showcase some of their skill sets other than just breaking tackles, which I think, all these guys have already showcased they can do that at a high level.
Let's talk a little bit about spring to this point. I believe, if my math is correct, Tuesday's practice will be the 7th. So we're getting close to the halfway point of spring ball. Rusty, I'll start with you. What has struck you the most of what we've seen, what we've heard to this point in spring ball, either if it's guys who have surprised you or guys that you think could really turn heads by the time we get to G-Day?
I think all three quarterbacks have kind of flashed at different times, and from things I've heard. And, there's an old saying, if you got two quarterbacks, you don't have one. Well, I can tell you this, that Georgia's got three, and all three of them can play. Now, somebody's going to separate themselves. And right now, I want to be real clear about this because I haven't talked a ton about him. I'm in the corner that this is Carson Beck's job to lose. He's got a head start on everybody, even though it's a new system with Mike Bobo. He's been there longer. He's kind of, been through some things, a little bit more practice. I do feel if Georgia had to play Monday, I think they would start Carson Beck. Now, do I think this is over with? I do not. I do not think this is over with. There's a lot of time to go. There's a lot of things happen in summer. Then you got a fall camp. And then let's be honest, man, Georgia's schedule is not exactly murderer's row. So they've got time to play multiple people to get people more reps and see how things go. I say it all the time. We covered this team, and we kept hearing Dewan Mathis buzz, and we heard it for 3 or 4 weeks. And Dewan Mathis started, and Todd Monken chose Dewan Mathis, and he got in the game and couldn't do it. So, with those things, I think this is a long way from being said. But I do think right now, I have heard that all three quarterbacks have had a really good first 2 weeks almost. We'll start seeing with this scrimmage when they get those ones versus ones, and each quarterback gets their reps in what's going on. So, but I think people don't want to hear that. I think they want one person to kind of take it and run. But right now, I think all three quarterbacks have shown some flashes of that's why they're at Georgia, and that's why they were all so highly rated coming out of high school.
It's honestly a good problem to have. You want to make it difficult for those coaches to decide. And to your point, Rusty, I mean, with this schedule, the way it's set up early, we may see a couple guys. It may present the opportunity for some of those guys to get out there. And even, too, if someone feels like they've separated themselves in the spring, it's kind of a different situation once the bullets start flying, once you're out there in a game. So it's going to be something where you have followed to this point and are going to continue to follow.
We don't have that Oklahoma game week 2, which we would have had, and you could have found out real quickly who they thought the guy was going to Norman. But unfortunately, we don't have that. So your entry was Ball State, I think. Little different game plan against Ball State, I think, than going to Norman, Oklahoma week 2. But we'll see how this thing plays out.
Yeah, not quite. Although they are a formidable MAC opponent, not quite the same level there. Kip, what about you when it comes to the spring to this point? Has anything really caught your attention? Anything of real interest from what we've seen and heard to this point?
Well, I haven't really, heard a lot of buzz about the wide receivers, but, just really impressed about what we've heard from Lawson Lucky so far. And I think obviously with Pierce Sperlin, being out, he's getting extra reps in practice. You talk about that tight end room, Darnell Washington going off to the NFL, bringing back the best tight end in the country for 3rd year in a row. But there's a lot of reps to be had there. Are they going to continue to use 2 tight end sets? Are they going to flex these guys out wide? How are they going to work in that with the wide receiver rotation that looks as deep as it, has looked at Georgia? I think, what you're hearing from Lawson Lucky is that he has a chance to play a pivotal role and to be a really good player. And just like Oscar Delp last year, you hear that this time of the year, but then, you knew last year, well, he's got 2 alphas ahead of him, 2 guys that have already showcased what they can do. But, this year, with Oscar Delp moving up into that role, Lawson Lucky also still has a chance to play a big role alongside him. And I think, he just brings, another elite pass catcher to the table, regardless of who's at quarterback for Georgia. I think that tight end position is going to be huge. You're gonna ask a lot of these guys. These guys are going to be the guys that get your quarterback out of precarious situations, guys you can rely on 3rd down. And so I think this position, you're going to ask some different things out of it than you asked in the past. I think as far as, what Lawson Lucky brings to the table overall as a tight end, I'm just really impressed by him. And I think that, he's a guy to watch it, when we get to see them out there, whether it's in practice or G-Day. I think he could be a guy that, really continues to get more buzz is if he can, try to not hit that freshman wall that they all hit, whether it's in the spring or the fall. It's tough to continue to play at that high level. That's kind of what Kirby tries to teach these guys. You're used to being the best player on the team. How do you handle it? When you have bad reps, when you get beat in a couple reps. And that's what we're going to learn a lot about him and a lot of these other freshmen. And I think that even with the depth that Georgia has, I think it's impressive how many freshmen, have already kind of made a name for themselves in what we said, 7 practices so far.
Yeah, I got to say, I've been pleasantly surprised in that regard because before spring, I always try to to write a story that's like, hey, here's the new guys that could make an impact. And you're sort of like, well, there's not a lot of spots where you can say, oh, this true freshman's all of a sudden going to get in the mix. And credit to a lot of these guys. They've really lived up to the occasion and shown that, they're willing to go out there and show out, which, that just, again, speaks to the talent they've continued to recruit at so many different positions and the way they've reloaded. I think the only position I would throw in that we haven't really talked about that we've written a good bit about is that left tackle battle. And it really feels like to this point, Austin Blasky and Ernest Green are in the mix there. And, 2 really different situations with those 2 guys. Austin Blasky, a veteran at this point, guy that got in the mix some last year, was in some of those jumbo packages and is a guy that can move around and play different positions. And then you got Ernest Green, who's a redshirt freshman who honestly was one of the more talked about players in last year's spring ball. He winds up being the second team left tackle at G-Day, a guy that a lot of people were really surprised by in a good way, and just dealt with injuries down the stretch. And by the time we got into the season, wound up not playing. But, I think it's a good problem to have for Georgia in the fact that they've got 2, looks like really talented, really capable options there. And I think it's a battle we're going to continue to see. And it's going to be really fascinating by the time we get to April 15th, who is where and what really both those 2 starting the red team and the black team, what those offensive lines look like. Well, on that, we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back, just talk briefly about what's left of spring ball, anything we're looking for, and then talk a little bit about Georgia's latest commitment. Welcome back, everybody. Well, like we mentioned, we're roughly around the halfway point of spring ball, and I'll start with you, Kip. With what's left of spring practice and including G-Day, what are you the most intrigued by? What are you going to be watching closely and trying to get a feel for as we get closer and closer to the end of spring?
I want to see the continued progression or just see what they have as far as their pass rushers, whether that's the next man up on the defensive line. We've seen Trey Scott now just continue to basically put guys in the league, coming in as a coach that not a lot of people knew about. Now it's who will Trey Scott put in there next. And I think you look at Bear Alexander. Is he ready to take that next step? We saw some flashes of him, obviously, in the national championship game. He kind of showed what he could do. Is he ready to step up and be a guy that you can count on? Drive after drive, playing increased snaps. Can he? And then Michael Williams. That's a guy that when we saw him on the field, it was, just truly impressive what he was able to do in his first year. But now, you might have to be the guy, as far as the pass rush is concerned, as far as just playing defensive end, which is now a premier position at Georgia. What can he do as maybe a team leader in that room? And then, you're always looking for guys that can, kind of go from good to great at Georgia when they get to their senior year. And I think for me, that guy's kind of Nazir Stackhouse, a guy that's just developed, continued to get better every year. And now he's just a really good defensive tackle. What is that defensive front? How are they able to do? And can they get a pass rush? If not, there's one of these true freshmen. What does Damon Wilson look like, in Georgia's defense? How does he look out there? Is he continuing to progress because, at least one or two of these true freshmen outside these edge guys, they're going to have to play a lot. And I think even though, the guys they lost last year had a lot of experience in Nolan Smith and Robert Beal, I think this group, the athleticism overall, the talent, the room, I don't want to say it, but, there's a chance they're able to improve overall in the level of play in that room and get some things done and do some things they haven't really been able to do the last couple of years, which I get it. It's kind of crazy to say that for potentially two guys getting drafted and one who may have, combined himself into being a first round pick. But I still think that room, the ceiling has not been found there. And I think this group has a chance to kind of just raise the overall level of play in this defense. So just want to see what the pass rush can do.
Rusty, what about you as far as what you want to see with what's left of spring and any position or positions that really intrigues you?
Well, I hate to be generic, but it's quarterback for me. I want to see and can anyone separate these last couple of weeks? G-Day is always like a 7-on-7 game, going to be a lot of passing, those types of things. The quarterbacks are dead. So the scrimmages, I wish we could see those, but, we'll talk with people as much as we can to find out. But, that will be action-packed. That will be physical. That will be with some things I think maybe can separate, maybe some backup linemen make moves. I talked about Michael Morris and those types of things. Can those guys, Dylan Fairchild, can they take that step as well? So you look at those things, and I think another guy that I'm interested in is Jonell Guerrero. How much can he pick up? That's a big, fast, physical dude. He's just like every other freshman, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and has head spinning, trying to learn calls and those types of things. Never been through anything like this. But physically, he is there. It just takes a little while mentally. And will the game slow down a little bit for him? Can he have that impact like Malachi Starks? Can he be a starter in game one as a true freshman? I don't know. He's certainly got the size and physicality to him. Mental will be him, and what kind of steps forwards he take. Because like you said, Jordan, there's only a few spots where these guys can make an impact this year on this team and the amount of talent coming back. But safety is one of those positions that's kind of got some open spots. And obviously this quarterback job is all eyes on quarterback. If there's one thing we know how to cover on Dogs 247, it's a quarterback race. By goodness, we've been through it the last 10.
When in doubt, if I'm looking for stories, I can write about the quarterbacks. I can guarantee that.
No doubt.
Kind of going off of what Rusty said, another position in the secondary that I really want to watch is cornerback. They're trying to figure out who's going to start in that spot Keely Ringo has vacated as he gets ready for the NFL. Rusty and I had talked over the weekend, and we had some notes for you guys and mentioned what Julian Humphrey has been doing. A guy that didn't play a ton his first year, but again, you think about the depth that was ahead of him. It sounds like he's turning heads. Really, it seemed like going in that we were all looking at Dalen Everett and Nyland Green as the favorites for that job. And it really seems like Julian's done himself really well in presenting what it takes to play. And even as young as he is, maybe get in the mix. So that's a battle that I'm really intrigued to see. And again, you can only take so much from how they line up at G-Day and what, that means for the future. But I think Julian's a really talented guy that has a chance to maybe turn heads and see what he can do as he gets ready for his second year in Athens.
It's also the first year I think we've all been together. Julian Rochester, has he got one more left in him, or is he still here?
I know. I need to look at some of the guys that are left. It feels like it's finally starting to turn over a little bit.
Every time I turn around, like Julian Rochester's getting one more rep, or he's wearing like 48 or something. I'm like, my goodness, Julian, make me feel old, man.
Well, let's make sure before we get out of here, let's talk about one of the recruiting nuggets from this weekend. Some pretty big news for Georgia, landing another commitment in what stands as the number one class in the 2024 cycle. Georgia adds 3-star Malachi Tolliver from Cartersville. He had some interest from, I think he had 19 scholarship offers other than Georgia, interest from schools like Auburn, Georgia Tech. Rusty, tell us a little bit about Malachi, how this sort of came together, and the kind of lineman that Georgia's lined up to get with him committing.
Well, here, I had a lot of questions, and obviously I'm actually checking the text right now, make sure that there's nothing breaking right now. There's not. Relax.
Great.
taking some info. I do work. The Malachi Tolliver, I'll say this, that I've known him for a little while. I haven't seen him as much. I've seen him practice once. I saw him at the Under Armour camp along with Kip. First time we got a chance to see him. And, the one thing I think would be very consistent, very positive, that is a very strong powerhouse program at Cartersville. They know how to practice hard. They put out multiple kids, not just Trevor Lawrence. I got kids all over the place in college rosters, and Mountain Miller Forstall, I think he's still in the league too as well. So they've got a lot of, NFL caliber people there. So the first thing you like is this kid's going to know how to practice hard. The next thing I'll say about him is a Georgia fan. When that Georgia offer came, I knew at that point it was kind of going to be tough to beat him. If he was actual take, he was a take. And Stacey Searles was over there, I think, twice in January. Stopped by school twice and saw him. I know Will Muschamp stopped by in the fall and saw him, and they also had him at camp last summer. So, when they make a decision like that, it's based off what they've seen. Georgia just doesn't take an in-state kid and go, hey, let's just hope it works out. Now sometimes they're not able to crack the lineup, but they have a pretty good amount of information on him and what they like from him. Now, one thing, Kip had texted me. I was working at camp on Sunday, and Kip had texted me and said his profile said 6'3", 300. I checked with two different places, and both different schools had him at 6'5". Georgia had him at 6'5" and a quarter. So listen, those types of things get, thrown around a little bit differently, but I'm pretty confident he's taller than the profile says. We'll get that adjusted as well, but got a long 80 and a half inch wingspan. So you got some length to work with right there. And, look, Georgia, I think people, they get so used to getting 5 stars and kids that aren't ranked in the top 100. And that's just the nature of our industry. If you get a 3-star kid, people are like, what are we doing? Well, what they're doing with Eric Stokes, he was a first-round draft pick. Solomon Kinley was a kid that was a 3-star, and he wound up being a 3-year starter. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're always 100% right. I talked about it yesterday on the radio. The NFL misses as well, too. So, if you're a 3-star prospect ranked in the recruiting industry, you are considered a Power 5 starter in college. I think people lose that at some point, at 3 stars. I think the number I saw the other day, only 4.5% kids nationwide are even ranked. 4.5% of 1.3 million high school football players. So keep that in perspective as well. So we'll see. I think Georgia's got they got some guys are in on, and because of the job that I do and the names and stuff, 2024 is an important class for Georgia at offensive line, especially at offensive tackle. Now, if you want to go look at 2025 and in-state offensive linemen and in-state tackles, that 2025 class is going to be one of the deepest O-line classes. That one, Gaston from Westlake, Mason Short of the Evans High School in Augusta, Nick Brooks at Buford is 6'8", 325 pounds. And he looked like, I think somebody said at the Under Armour camp, he looked like Isaiah Wilson, like how big he was. There's only so many of those bodies around. So 2024 is an important class. But I think when you look at two classes together, 24 and 25, the state of Georgia is as deep as I've seen it at offensive linemen.
Kip, any thoughts about Malachi and just the offensive line recruiting this cycle and the cycle after that?
Let's not forget also for 2025 that number 1 overall recruit in the country, David Sanders, at a Providence Day school in Charlotte, where Georgia just signed Kieran Jones, a defensive back athlete. Georgia's in pretty good there early on in his recruitment. Number 1 recruit in the country. You do not often see that from an offensive lineman. I mean, rarely, if ever, maybe once or twice ever in the industry as an offensive lineman, the number 1 overall prospect. But the guy's got an outstanding frame. Loves Georgia, and obviously Stacey Searles has gotten in there pretty good early on, and the coaching staff's impressed him. So that's a big one as well. So we're not trying to go ahead and ask everyone to check out for offensive line recruiting this cycle, but right. It is what it is. You got to get some guys. You can't not recruit the position for a cycle and skip it. We've actually Rusty and I have been here long enough to actually see that happen before, and what that can do to a program whenever you do not continue to stockpile the offensive line room, and it wreaks havoc on your program. And so they got to get some guys. It just puts an emphasis on their evals. They got to get these evals right. You got to get guys that are going to buy into your program, maybe guys that are willing to develop for multiple years, and guys that can help you in year 3. And so, I mean, that's the key there. Obviously, in state for Georgia this cycle, getting a guy that can play multiple positions and be versatile, that there's a lot of value in that. So when I look at Malachi Tolliver, I see a guy that kind of reminds me of a couple guys Georgia signed last cycle. You look at Joshua Miller, you look at Kelton Smith, guys that kind of have that positional flexibility, that they got the length to play offensive tackle if you need them to, but could also play guard. I think you could put Tolliver in at right guard and not worry about it one bit. I don't know his measurements, I don't know his frame, but I know that just overall looking at him and what I saw at Under Armour, he's a guy that I think can play right tackle, play right guard if you need him to. And I think that holds a lot of value. And he's also a guy that I think is going to continue to get stronger as he reshapes his body and just, he gets into that strength and conditioning program. I think a guy in year 2, year 3 can be completely different player. And we've seen that in Georgia's offensive line. We've seen some guys that you look at them and you have to do a double take. They don't look the same at all. And, just guys like Jordan Davis, Isaiah Wilson, Andrew Thomas. I mean, these are guys that came in 350, 360 pounds and were playing 30, 40 pounds lighter at Georgia. So it's just it's amazing what they can do in that program. And I think that's what you got to get in the offensive line. You got to get a guy that you think you can develop and has the traits that you look for as far as tenacity, toughness, guys that just want to get in there and work. And I think that's definitely what Malachi Tolliver brings to the table and gives them a good frame to play multiple positions. In state, you still got to work on a guy like Daniel Calhoun. It's a guy that Georgia's made a priority, but that's a battle right there in his recruitment. It just tells you that the offensive tackle position is just so down this year. Everyone's going to key in on the same guys. And so Alabama, Tennessee, Texas, I think if this ends up being an Alabama-Georgia battle, those June official visits for Daniel Calhoun will be huge. There's just not a huge margin for error for the elite offensive tackle position. So it's going to be a big test for Stacey Searles in his first full recruiting cycle at Georgia. And if he can bring in a guy like that, but you got to get the Malachi Tollivers of the world and you got to hit on those evals.
Couple of questions there. Bo Hewley is not enrolled at Georgia yet, so offensive tackle. Kit brought his name up. Kelton Smith's a guy that I really, really like. So I'm not saying that Georgia don't have it, but you have to continue to stockpile those tackles. Saw how important that was. I mean, Broderick Jones didn't play much. He got inserted into the national championship game, in that game. So you got to have those guys, and if you're going to continue to play at that level. So I don't want to put people into panic mode over offensive line, but I do think Georgia needs to add 1 or 2 more tackles. And question it for do we leave from Jordan Harris for Daniel Calhoun? First of all, I think Daniel Calhoun's going to wind up being a guard, which is not a bad thing. You got to have those big body guards. Look at Tate Ratledge and Truss right now. That's 2 massive human beings. So nothing wrong with playing guard, and those guys get NFL paychecks too. But I do think Georgia's in that thing deep. Alabama and Miami as well with that. So we'll see. Official visits in June are going to be a big for him. And last question, I think we had this is a great one. Who was the last kid from Buford to sign with Georgia? And then a couple people mentioned Grayson. I'll give you a good answer to that. I'll give you a Buford and a Grayson kid at the same time. Griffin Scroggs went to both schools, so Georgia signed him. He was at Buford for 2, and he went to Grayson for 2. So they did reach in there. But obviously Grayson put out a lot of players. Buford with KJ Bolden, Edric Houston, they're all their guys. Right now, Justice Haynes was only there for about 10 and a half months, coming over from Blessed Trinity. So I consider him a Blessed Trinity prospect. KJ Bolden and Edric Houston are 2 highly, highly recruited players for a reason. And I think Georgia at some point this year is going to kind of end that quote unquote Buford streak with one of those 2. We'll see as it gets down to it. I don't think they're going over 2 on both. I know they're 2 major targets for Georgia.
And we'll follow that the entire way. There's no doubt about that. Before we get out of this episode, Going to let Craig Lawson start this Georgia men's basketball minute. Tennessee and Alabama still have 0 Final Four appearances. Did want to mention there was kind of one Georgia nugget from the Elite Eight, and it was Dusty May, former Mike White assistant at Florida. He is the head coach at Florida Atlantic, and they're headed to the Final Four. Got a big win to move on and keep their season alive. Mike White was interviewed after the fact. I believe it was Andy Katz who interviewed him, talking about the work that Dusty has done. And, I had a chance back in January. I asked Mike about Dusty and Florida Atlantic because they were one of the better non-Power 5, I guess you would say in the football terms, teams of the regular season. He spoke really, really highly of the job Dusty's done. So if you're looking for a team to root for, if you want to kind of keep a Georgia feel, I would say Florida Atlantic's probably that team. Guys, you got any feelings with this Final Four? You got Florida Atlantic, San Diego State, Miami, UConn. Who do you guys think will be in that national title game, and who's going to win it?
How those brackets look, guys? How did you guys do in your Final Four?
Busted. I had Arizona going very far, so that did not work.
After the first day, I thought I was going to stop looking, but I just pulled up the Dogs 247 bracket, and hell, if I didn't make second, I forgot I had UConn in that Final Four. So I'd love to tell you that I got UConn, but I had them losing. But it's all about defense, man. For me, I'm going. I watch San Diego State, and they just smother you. They smother you. They don't give you a chance to get, any ball movement whatsoever. They don't give you a chance to catch your breath. And so, I just love the tenacity they play with. I think they got a great chance, and it's just this has got to be the wackiest Final Four in recent memory.
It's got my attention, the games, and I don't watch a ton of college basketball anymore, but I have watched a ton of this tournament. And because you just never know what's going to happen, I'm very interested in the future of the tournament. Is this a signal of how things are? I mean, it's no secret how Miami built their team. I mean, they went out and NIL'd this thing and got all these transfers in, and these guys, they're putting it together at the right time and getting hot. I mean, you look at Georgia, have no idea how or their plan or how deep they are with NIL and basketball. But to know that in 1 year, you can make a dent if you get the right guys in college basketball. So you look at all these things, and it's interesting. But I don't know if the rating is going to be really high this weekend, but I'm going to watch it. I look forward to it. Also, I'm a girl dad, so I'm going to look forward to watching Iowa and South Carolina Friday night. That game is going to be to watch Caitlin Clark go against South Carolina. So I'm ready to tune in for some basketball this week. Basketball is going to this is the 1 year weekend of the year that basketball gets the full Rusty Man sale. They're going to get it for 4 days this weekend.
Yeah, we're ordering food in Friday night. I want to watch that Iowa South Carolina game, and
Yeah.
on the men's side, I think it's UConn, and I'm gonna stick with the Dusty May train. We're gonna say FAU makes it to the title game, but I'm picking UConn. I think the Huskies. It's been a little bit since they've been really that relevant in men's basketball, but I think they get it done.
Yep.
Well, yeah, go ahead, Rusty.
I'm just glad. I grew up Fab Five, watching all that crew, North Carolina, and actually went to Cincinnati, Ohio one time to watch Alabama play North Carolina in the Sweet 16. That's how big of a fan I was way back today. So I hope college basketball trends up and gets some excitement. But the one thing I'll tell you, that if this is the sign of things to come, it's going to be wild watching March Madness every year.
No doubt about it. And we're going to keep everybody up to date on what's going on with Mike White and company, continuing to work to reload this roster as they get ready for his second season later this year. So we're going to wrap up this episode. Appreciate the whole crew for popping on. Appreciate everybody who checked this out live, everybody who's listening to this after the fact. So we got out of here on that. For Kip Adams and Rusty Mansell, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care.